What's up everybody, FTWitachi here, you know what it is. Thank you all very much for tuning in to this video and this guide for Warlocks for Shadowlands in regards to Covenants. Covenants are one of the major systems introduced in World of Warcraft Shadowlands. As you level, you will get to meet and experience all 4 Covenants. The Covenants each occupy one of the major zones in Shadowlands. As you get to know each Covenant, explore their lands, and learn their story, you can think about who you'd like to ally with, because when you reach maximum level, now level 60, you'll get to pick a side. The Kyrians occupy Bastion, Maldraxxus is controlled by the Necrolords, the Night Fae call Ardenweald home, and the Revendreth is the domain of the Ventir. Whichever Covenant you choose will grant you 2 new abilities. One is a Covenant signature ability granted to all who ally with this Covenant, no matter which class you are playing. And the other is a Covenant's class ability, a combat ability granted to all members of each class in the Covenant. As a Warlock, the abilities granted to you may affect which Covenant you favor, which is why we're going to go ahead and create this guide. There's a couple of guides that I do want to go ahead and announce before we get into deep details, that this is being created before Shadowlands gets released. If anything major happens and changes, for example, we've already released our Destruction, Affliction, and Demonology guides for pre-patch of Shadowlands. We will be releasing new guides for all 3 specs when Shadowlands gets released. And again, same thing with the Covenants. If anything major happens or changes, when Shadowlands is released, we will go ahead and update the guides. So stay tuned for more content. Brought to you by FTWitachi, so be sure to subscribe. But without further ado, let's go ahead and see what is the best Covenant for Warlocks in Affliction, Destruction, and Demonology. But before we do that, let's go ahead and give you guys a little bit of a quick rundown on all of the Warlock Covenant abilities. Again, there are 4 signature abilities depending on which Covenant you choose, and of course 4 class abilities depending on which Covenant you choose. We're going to go ahead and start off with the Kyrian Warlock Covenant ability. Scurrying Tith deals 60% of spell power arcane damage instantly, and 90% of that spell power damage over 18 seconds. If the enemy does die while affected by Scurrying Tith, you generate 5 soul shards. If they survive, Scurrying Tith's cooldown is refreshed. 2% of base mana, 40-yard range, 2-second cast, and a 40-second cooldown. The Kyrian Covenant signature ability is Summon Steward. Call your steward to bring you a Phial of Serenity that can be consumed to restore 20% of your health and remove all curses, diseases, poison, and blood effects. Your steward additionally offers an access to a selection of useful amenities for 4 minutes as well. Instant cast, 5-minute cooldown. Next up, we've got the Ventir, Warlock's Covenant ability. The Warlock Ventir Covenant ability is Impending Catastrophe. Call forth a cloud of chaotic anima that travels to the target enemy, dealing 20% of spell power. Shadow damage to enemies in its path, and when anima reaches the target, it explodes, inflicting either Curse of Weakness or Tongues and dealing 105% spell power. Shadow damage over 12 seconds to all nearby enemies. 4% of base mana, 40-yard range, 2-second cast, and a 1-minute cooldown. The Ventir Covenant signature ability is Door of Shadows. When through the shadows appearing at the targeted location, 35-yard range, 1.5-second cast, 1 charge, 1-minute recharge. For those of you that play Overwatch, very similar to Reaper's ability. Next up, Necrolord Warlock's Covenant ability is Decimating Bolt. Hurl bolts of decimating magic at your target, dealing 4 times 30% of spell power, shadow damage. For Affliction, this is also going to be increasing the damage of your next 3 Shadow Bolts by 100%. For Demonology, this will be increasing the damage of your next 3 Shadow Bolts or Demon Bolts by 100%. And of course, for Destruction, this will be increasing your next 3 Incinerates by 100%. Also, got to go ahead and notify, if you are playing Affliction with Drained Soul, it will go ahead and swap to Drained Soul as well. This is a 4% of base mana, 40-yard range, 2.5-second cast, 45-second cooldown. Necrolord's Covenant signature ability is Fleshcraft. Form a shield of flesh and bone over 4 seconds and prevents damage equal to 20% of your maximum health. Channeling near a corpse claims their essence to grow the shield, up to 50% of your maximum health. This is most effective against powerful enemies. 10-yard range, 4-second channel, 2-minute cooldown. And last but not least, we got the Night Fae Warlock Covenant ability. Soul Rot. Wither away all life force of your current target and up to 3 additional targets nearby, causing your primary target to suffer 100% of the spell power times 2. Nature damage and secondary targets to suffer 100% of the spell power, nature damage over 8 seconds. Also, for the next 8 seconds, casting Drain Life will cause you to also drain life from any enemy affected by your Soul Rot. So Drain Life will kind of turn into a little bit of an AoE mechanic there. Cost is 0.5% of base mana, 40 yard range, 1.5 second cast with a 1 minute cooldown. Night Phase Covenant's signature ability is Soul Shape. Turn into a Vulpin, teleporting 15 yards forward and increasing your movement speed by 50%. You may reactivate Soul Shape every few seconds to teleport again. Last 12 seconds or indefinitely while in a rest area. Instant cast, 1.5 minute cooldown, and there's also tons of additional cosmetic forms as well for this Soul Shape ability. Next up, we're going to go ahead and get into which Covenant is best for your Warlock spec. I'm going to go ahead and start off by announcing Ventir within Ravendreth and the Night Fae within Ardenweald are not selected for either Demonology, Affliction, or Destruction. Due to the ties with your Covenant, I find it a little bit difficult to go ahead and select an AoE specific ability, which is very minimal depending on the fights that you go ahead and choose, depending on whether you are in PvE or PvP content. So I've gone with the Necrolord and Maldraxxus and the Kyrian and Bastion for Affliction, Destruction, and Demonology, and the reason for this is it is a huge DPS increase compared to Ventir and the Night Fae. The Night Fae have a class ability called Soul Rot, and the Ventir have a class ability called Impending Catastrophe. Both are AoE related and require multiple targets. They're also their signature abilities. For the Night Fae, you have Soul Shape, and for the Ventir, you have Dwarf Shadows. Both of those abilities are very unique and basically cosmetic-like. They don't really affect you in any way. Of course, there's a little bit of movement ability, which is very, very nice. But overall, damage-wise, as a DPS, as a Warlock, you're not really going to want to go for the Ventir or the Night Fae. However, I do want to go ahead and announce this before we get any further into this video. Please, if you're not going for high-end mythic keys, if you're not going for any high-end mythic world first boss kills and raiding, and if you're not going in for some top-level PvP content, I strongly suggest you choose a Covenant that you want to go ahead and affiliate yourself with. Do not worry about the abilities. However, we're going to go ahead and get into Kyrian and Necrolord in just a second to go ahead and let you know which one you should be selecting for Affliction, Destruction, and Demonology. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start off with Affliction. When it comes to an Affliction Warlock at this moment in time, for raiding and Mythic Plus content, as well as PvP content, the Kyrian is sadly, I mean in my opinion sadly, the best Covenant of choice. Again, Sims are not quite finished, just to give you all a heads up, but this is at this moment in time. If anything changes, I will go ahead and update you guys. But the best Covenant is going to be the Kyrian for an Affliction Warlock in any matter or form of gameplay that you choose. After the sweeping nerfs to all the other Covenants, specific Warlock spells, Scurrying Tith is by far the most versatile spell. For most raid content, the main benefit of Scurrying Tith is that it counts as a dot to increase your Malefic Rapture's damage. So it is a huge buff when it comes to Affliction, and in addition to just being an extra dot for a class that specializes in dots, when it comes to Mythic Plus content, you still retain the benefit of a added single target damage for bosses, but in multi-target scenarios, you can throw Scurrying Tith on an ad that's about to die and instantly gain 5 shards, while you can be throwing into spamming Malefic Rapture on AoE as well. So it's absolutely important that if you are an Affliction Warlock and you are going for that top tier gameplay, you're going to want to go ahead and choose the Kyrian Covenant. Next up, for Destruction Warlocks, the best Covenant is for raiding, Mythic Plus, and PvP, exact same as Affliction, but a little bit different, is the Kyrian Covenant. Scurrying Tith is designed to fit all situations pretty much, so it can work as a dot with a very high uptime on straight single target fights, but it also has a nice twist when introducing adds. The soulbind bonus you gain through the Kyrian Covenant are also very nice, despite the Summon Steward ability not really bringing much to the table. Yeah, it's kind of cool, it's kind of niche, but it really doesn't affect you much, again, in both Affliction and Destruction. But hey, it's still an awesome side ability to go ahead and have. But the Scurrying Tith ability, the Warlock specific ability for Kyrian, again, it's a nice dot effect, and it's also a nice single target ability, especially when there's introducing of adds or enemy players that are very low on health. Go ahead and utilize that, and you're going to go ahead and have a nice backlash from that ability. But then when it comes to Mythic Plus content, It has its place in dungeons as well, both on bosses, but also on packs with multiple adds. You're able to proc the 5 shard bonus. Again, this is what's really cool about it. But like I was stating earlier, in PvP and PvE content, when you have enemies that are very, very low on health, go ahead, proc that 5 shard bonus often, which basically nets you up to 1 to even 3 Rain of Fire casts, or 2.5 roughly Chaos Bolt casts, depending on how your rotation is working for you. Alternatively, you're able to maintain high uptime on this dot due to the reset cooldown of the ability. So it is very, very great for DPS increase compared to the other 3 covenants for a Destruction Warlock. And last but not least, the best covenant for a Demonology Warlock. As you guys know, this is my main spec when it comes to Warlocks. I'm actually happy because it is the covenant that I wanted to choose in the beginning. Sadly, if I go to Destruction and Affliction, this isn't going to go so well. But it's not going to be the worst. It's the second best covenant anyways for Destruction and Affliction Warlocks. But anyways, here we go. For rating, PvP, and Mythic Plus, again, I strongly suggest you go with the Necrolord. The niche Demonology fills for single target is complemented very nicely with Decimating Bolt. This is mostly applicable when using specific conduits and legendaries geared towards buffing Demon Bolt further, which I will get into later on. But overall, I strongly suggest, because I'm going to be going that route with the buffing of Demon Bolt when it comes to conduits and legendaries, which I'll be going over in my conduits and legendary video guide, so stay tuned for that. I strongly suggest, because Demon Bolt is basically your main ability as a Demonology Warlock, the Necrolord is a great way to go. And what also I love about the Necrolord is the Fleshcraft. It is probably the strongest PvP mechanic, especially when it comes to a signature ability. It is probably one of the best PvP abilities that you can gain from your Covenants, so I strongly suggest to go when you are playing Demonology Warlocks, Necrolord. But again, Kyrian is also there and very, very high up there for Demonology. But overall, if you are able to pull off, which I go ahead and state in my Legendaries and Conduits guide, if you can buff up that Demon Bolt, definitely go ahead, hit up Decimating Bolt from the Necrolords as your Covenant choice as a Demonology Warlock in both PvP, PvE, and of course, Mythic Plus content with the Keystones if you're going in that route as well. So for those of you that tuned in, thank you all very much for tuning in. I hope this kind of helps you a little bit when you're going ahead and playing Affliction, Destruction, and Demonology Warlocks in Shadowlands and deciding which Covenant you want to select. Again, I've stated this already. Pick a Covenant that you want to go ahead and affiliate yourself with. If you see a cool ability that you want to go ahead and use, do not worry about the damage output. Do not worry about anything else other than it's cool, it's nice and flavorful for you, because it's game changing, but it's not really. It's only game changing if you are going for very, very high level PvP, or if you are going for some world first content in PvE. But other than that, please go ahead and select the Covenant. That is what you want to go ahead and play. But this guide is just to go ahead and give you guys a little bit of flavor, a little bit of input on what to expect in Shadowlands. Catch you guys in the next videos. Peace out, everybody.